that Isak didn't feature in their goalless draw at Aston Villa. What's the latest today?
I think the situation with Isak is that he will remain a Newcastle player when the window closes, unless Newcastle United sign a replacement. And it can't just be any old replacement. It has to be a replacement who's good enough to lead the line for them in the Premier League and also in the Champions League. There'll be the draw for the Champions League at the end of this month. Newcastle are guaranteed to be playing some big sides in the initial league phase of that competition. So I think if Isak is still desperate to leave Newcastle, his best chance of getting out of Newcastle is if Newcastle sign an elite level replacement. And of course, then Newcastle would have to agree a deal for him to leave with the clubs who are interested in signing him. But that needs to happen. Newcastle are not going to let him go unless they have that replacement in place.
And you've got to wonder who is out there.
Who's
they
left?
They went for Hugo Ekitike.
Go on.
He's ended up going to Liverpool. They went for Benjamin Sesko, and you can't blame Newcastle for what they did in that deal. They went all out to try and get Sesko, and it wasn't a case of Sesko snubbing Newcastle. It was the fact that he wanted Manchester United from the outset. So they can't really be blamed for that. But then who's left now? There's been talk of Ollie Watkins, but if Aston Villa were to do any business on Ollie Watkins, they then would need to bring in a replacement. Nicholas Jackson is another one who, on paper, would probably be the most straightforward deal to do if they can stump up the cash, because Chelsea aren't going to let him go on the cheap, but his game time is going to be limited. He's not featuring for Chelsea at the moment. He says he wants to explore his options. One player that they are looking to bring in, not necessarily as a replacement for Alexander Isak, is Yoane Wissa. Now, this is another saga that has continued throughout the summer. He doesn't want to play for Brentford anymore. He didn't feature for them over the weekend. There's an expectation that Newcastle United will approach Brentford again over the player, but it seems like he's going to be a replacement for Callum Wilson rather than Alexander Isak. An interesting development today was on Yoane Wissa's Instagram page. Now, he's removed any association with Brentford. He hasn't got a picture of himself on his page anymore, and all of these pictures now in his social media file, they don't contain anything associated with Brentford. This is starting to get a little bit unsavoury. He doesn't want to play for them again, but Newcastle United are going to have to stump up the cash because Brentford aren't going to let him go on the cheap.
Hello again. Right, as promised, we're going to talk Alexander Isak. I've said that a few times this window. Will he get his move to Liverpool?
I think the only way he'll get his move is if Newcastle United sign a replacement. And it can't be any old replacement. It's got to be a frontline striker who can play immediately in the Premier League, who can play immediately
Who's out there
in the Champions League.
Who's that?
That's what Newcastle are looking for. I think if they can sign somebody and then Liverpool come back in for Isak and they could do a deal at a valuation that suits both parties, then he could potentially get his move. But otherwise, he's not going to get his move. He's got a contract at Newcastle United, so he would have to be reintegrated into the Newcastle side when the window closes.
Do you see that happening? Could that happen?
I've seen stranger things in football. Newcastle have been very strong in their stance that he's their player. He's not going to go on the cheap as they see it, and also that he's not going to go unless they sign a replacement. They haven't been able to sign a replacement yet, and if that situation doesn't change, then yeah, I could see him staying.
Well, we know Arne Slot wants another attacker. How long will he wait to get Isak before he says, that's it, we're moving on, we're looking for someone else?
I honestly do not know the answer to that question. That is a question that only Arne Slot and the recruitment team at Liverpool could answer. But you are totally right. He's made it clear in public that he feels that as good as Liverpool are, and they've had another exceptional transfer window again, both with players coming in and players going out, he does feel that they need another attacking player. Obviously, they've got their targets, and it's no secret that Isak is the number one target.
And listen up to this, because Jamie Carragher spoke to the Premier League show earlier. He says Alexander Isak and Yoane Wissa's behaviour is unacceptable.
Do you think that the clubs looking to sign these players need to consider that behaviour?
They won't, whether we think they should or shouldn't. We know these players are doing that because they think that gives them more chance of getting out of the club and forcing the move. Yeah, you can look at the Crystal Palace lads, they're not going about it in such sort of strong circumstances, but maybe the two that we're talking about maybe get their moves and the Crystal Palace lads don't. I don't know. But no, I think the way these are going about it, I think if I was ever involved in a transfer, and gladly I wasn't, I was delighted to stay at Liverpool, but I'd like to think I'd probably have gone about it that way. I don't think when you've got a club paying your wages, your supporters paying to watch you play, that you should refuse to play or train. I don't think that's acceptable.
Not acceptable, says Jamie, but do the players have a choice?
I mean, obviously, it's not the way to behave, it's not the way to get what you want, but we see this virtually every window. I think looking from the outside in this case, it would appear that these players feel they've been promised something and the clubs are not, keeping to their side of the bargain. I think in Isak's case, he feels that he was promised a new contract and then he didn't get a new contract. And in Wissa's case, I think he feels that he was promised that he could leave and now Brentford are not playing ball. But the bottom line is what Jamie said. You've got a contract with that club. And I think taking on a fan base, you've got to be really, really careful the way you treat the supporters of your club. When you do things like delete or mention of the club you play for, the club who pay your wages, the club whose fans pay your wages, buy shirts with your name on the back, fans who sing your name, and then you go and delete all mention of that club. Or in Isak's case, it would appear he doesn't want to play for that club anymore. I think it's a dangerous game to play. I think Jamie's totally right. Make your point behind closed doors, but in public, you still play and train for the club who pay your wages. And there are different ways of going about getting what you want.
Sure. Isn't there a situation though, Darmish, where Jamie said like Ezra's going about it the right way, he's playing or whatever. Ezra's might have an important European game and he plays, might get injured, right? Whereas the other two have kicked off and they might get their moves. So dangerous game, yes, but can you understand why the players are doing what they're doing?
We need to be careful as well because we don't know the full story of why these players are supposedly behaving, as Jamie Carragher says, embarrassingly, or he's made his opinion. But does he know everything that's going on behind the scenes at Newcastle? Does he know anything that might have been promised to Alexander Isak? Does he know anything that might have been promised to Johan Wissa? And I'm not saying that that's an excuse to do that, but until we know the full facts, and I'm sure some of these facts will come out in the wash if and when these players get their moves or not. Because there are certain things that might be happening behind the scenes that players might have agreed with clubs and they feel, well, you've said this to me, so why are you going back on your word? So why should I play ball then? Just because I'm under contract? Yes, I'm under contract. But at the end of the day, if it was the other way around, sometimes clubs cannot wait to get rid of a player. Say the player doesn't want to go, but he sometimes can be forced out. It can work both ways. So I think we just need to be a little bit careful before we start labelling, right, this player's like this and this player hasn't kicked off, so he's right and he's wrong. I am not saying that Alexander Isak and Johan Wissa are behaving in the correct manner. All I'm saying is there are certain things that might be happening behind the scenes that we are not privy to that might have made them behave in the way that they are doing.
Absolutely.
I think there's a line that you don't cross. You always turn up for work. If you were very, very unhappy with your boss, for whatever reason, and you could have very good reasons and there could be a lot going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of, you would still turn up to work every day because you're professional. That's what you do, and what's going on behind the scenes, you'd keep that behind the scenes. And I think when you bring fan bases into it as well, you just have to be very, very careful because everybody knows Isak's not going to stay at Newcastle forever. Everybody knows Wissa's not going to stay at Brentford forever. But I think it's just you know, there's a sort of unwritten rule in football that you train and you play for your club. And if you've got issues, you deal with them face to face with your representatives and with executives at the club. You don't let it become a big media story like this.
What about Johan Wissa? What's going on there?
It's pretty unsavoury, actually. I mean, with regard to what's going on at Brentford, it seems pretty unsavoury, but it's clear that he is an attacker that Newcastle United are pursuing. We're talking about replacements for Alexander Isak. I don't think Johan Wissa would necessarily be a replacement for Alexander Isak, probably one more for Callum Wilson, because Callum Wilson has left the club as well. There's an expectation that Newcastle United will once again initiate